just wanted to kind of like finish up the model today, right? So I am going to show you guys that we are going to apply the subdivision, maybe add a few more extra edge loops in some areas for refined shaping and animation purposes. But also just want to do a little more gear, right? We kind of get some little shorts here. But I also wanted to kind of put on some gear for the shoulders, right? Now, the nice thing is this is pretty easy, right? We've kind of done this a little bit before. When we did the eyes, we used the add primitive. In this case, though, I'm already on biped gear, right? Remember, 4 is your object mode, quick key, right? So you can just click on whatever object you want. You can always go to your outliner to click on it. And if I go to, say, 3, like one of my edit modes, right? 1, 2, 3, you'll notice your add primitive is still available, particularly if you're in the modeling workspace. Now, what I could do is I could go to this add primitive. And remember, with the add primitive tool, if you hold down your left mouse button, right? So if you hold down your left mouse button on it, it brings up the options here, right? Any tool actually can do this. See how you extrude? If I hold down left mouse button, there's other extrude options. So I'm going to hold down my left mouse button on the add primitive one. It's the one that's got like a cube and a plus. And I can add cylinder, right? We kind of did this with sphere for our eyeballs last time. So I'm going to add cylinder. The nice thing, though, is this time I can actually do it to the actual gear that we've already got started. Now, you will notice there are some options up here, like vertices. I don't think I need 32 sides, so I'll say like maybe 12, all right? And you can, of course, pick other things like snap to geometry. And what's cool is this tool kind of snaps to geometry, right? So if I hold down left mouse button and drag, so it starts to drag out a cylinder. Now, if I hold down Alt, it'll snap to the center. And if I hold down Shift, it'll keep it uniform, right? And then when I let go of those, you see how I can kind of drag out the length, right? So we can drag out the length for ourselves, right? So I can drag that out, and that actually starts to create a cylinder for us. So add primitive is kind of a neat way to just quickly kind of add in a primitive kind of roughly in the area, roughly the orientation. I could have actually picked a different axis, right? Believe it or not, you can actually pick the axis so to kind of go in at a bit of a different angle. So it's actually really cool. It's a neat feature. I actually take advantage of it often. And you can add it to an existing object, particularly if you're in an edit mode. So that's why I was in face mode, and it's added to biped gear. But that's just a neat feature that you can use to add these things. So I'll just kind of undo really quick just to show it again, right? So make sure you're in edit mode for the object. Hold down left mouse button on the add primitive, which is kind of right above your extrude tool. Go to cylinder. I would say make the vertices count lower. That's the sides, right? We don't need to have 32 sides. And like I said, if I want to, I could actually try a different axis, like x-axis, or even y. So you can actually try kind of different axes if you want to get a different effect. Right? So you do have these kind of cool little axes controls. But remember, if you left-click drag, it starts to drag out a circle. Alt snaps to the center. Shift keeps it uniform, so it's making a perfect circle. And then if you let go, you can actually drag it kind of one way or the other. And then click, and it makes your cylinder. Now at this point, I don't need this tool anymore, so what I could do is I could just go to, say, W for move. And we can do middle mouse button, right, to just kind of move it up. I can hit E for rotate, middle mouse button to do view rotate. Now, keep in mind that this doesn't have shade smooth on, so I'll probably have to right click, right? And you'll see shade smooth is actually part of your options in your face context menu, right? So if I go to face context menu, I can go to shade smooth, and there we go. And I don't really want the sides, so I could delete those, right? Select them, delete. Remember, delete key, right? Delete key, faces. Pick the faces option. And then, of course, if I want to, I could select, these. Remember, I have a quick key for shortest path, but there isn't a default one, so you'll select those, delete, pick faces. And now you see how we actually have the starting point for shoulder armor, right? So if you want kind of that nice, like, half cylinder kind of shoulder armor, what you do is you start with a half cylinder, right? You actually create a cylinder in the area, delete what you don't want of it. Remember, you could use select linked right? I set it to spacebar because I use it a lot, and I think spacebar is kind of a cooler quick key for it. Plus, I'm not an animator, so I don't really use that for animation in Blender. But it is right bracket by default. It's kind of right above enter. Select linked. And then, of course, I can hit E for rotate, middle mouse button, W for move. And you see I can kind of move this kind of roughly into position here for some shoulder armor. Now, remember, we also want to thicken this, right? So, to thicken something, and the trickiest part of this really was just the add primitive. But to thicken, remember, we're already in face mode, right? 3 for faces. Right click, right? Remember, right click brings up your context menu for faces. Extrude faces along normals. We saw that in our last new lecture for thickening, right? So if I extrude along normals, it thickens this armor out for me. And now I've got shoulder armor. And of course, I can do select linked. Remember, that's right here, though. I can do middle mouse button and bring it back down. If I want to maybe scale it down a little bit, I can, right? R for scale. Remember, middle mouse button will do uniform scale. And I might want to tighten the shape up here a little bit. It's a little rounded. So remember, Alt-C for loop cut. Remember, it's right here, though, right? That's extrude. That's loop cut. Alt-C is the quick key for loop cut, and I could just simply put an edge loop right down the center there, and it sharpens it up. I'm also going to put one kind of right through here to sharpen that up a little bit. And now we've got some shoulder armor. Now, if you wanted to, one of the things you could also do is go back to 3 for face mode. Remember, Q is your quick key for your select tool, but it also toggles. You just keep hitting Q, and it will cycle back to circle select. What I could do is I could simply select, and remember shift. If you hold down shift, that adds to selections. I could select all those faces on the top. And this is a prime example of when inset is really cool, right? I could hit I for inset. It's right here. It's right below extrude. Middle mouse drag to inset it. You see how it does an extrusion kind of geometry, but it kind of scales it in. And then I could right click to bring up face context menu, extrude faces along normal direction inward. And then maybe, and you'll see how inset's actually still on. This is one of the neat things, is that some of your tools will stay on when you use another tool. So I can just do middle mouse drag again to do another little inset. And now I've got some cool kind of little shoulder armor, right? Some cool little shoulder armor for this character. That's kind of what I felt like just kind of doing today. I want to do a little more geometry adding and kind of talk to you guys about applying your modifiers again, because at this point, technically, we want to be done with this model, right? It's not the most thorough of every little aspect you can do for a biped character, but it's meant to be a good, more advanced model than a crab creature was, right? And teach you a lot of new principles and reinforce a lot of those old tools. Like, we didn't do any retopologizing or sculpting of forms. Just not part of what we want to do for this, right? But it's kind of cool. You can use that add primitive to kind of put these shapes in here, and then if you delete what you don't want, it makes it pretty easy then to thicken it with extrude along normals and just add a little bit of extrusions and insets to get this extra little shape. Now at this point, I'm going to go to 4 for object mode because we do want to make sure that our low res looks pretty good. So remember, when we're done, we basically want to apply all. Now remember, if you click on the little V's here, right, for each modifier, you can apply them one at a time, and you kind of want to do mirror first and then subdivision. But remember, if you go to Edit, Preferences, right, Add-ons, you can go to Mod, right? Go to the magnifying glass up here, type in Mod, check on your modifier tools, and that gives you this. I hit Apply All, and now we can see that that is actually our low-res geometry. So I'm going to go to 4 to Object Mode, go back to the body, hit Apply All, and now you'll see that that is our low res there. Now, at this point, you might want to redo a mirror at least temporarily on this, just to kind of give you symmetry back. So remember, you can always go 4 for object mode, make sure your edit tab's up. Remember, there's that little V right here, right? If you click on that, it opens this up, go to the edit tab, auto mirror will be there, particularly if you've turned that on in your edit preferences, right? Remember, this time though, when you do the preferences, mesh, check on auto mirror, just like you check on edit mesh tools. Now, if you've already turned those on in your Blender and you haven't had to reinstall Blender at all, you're fine, right? Those modifiers, those add-ons will already be on. I just want to continually reteach where those things are at in case you didn't have them on. So just for a little bit extra work on the hands and the knees, I'm going to do an auto mirror again. Not subdivision, this time I don't need it. But generally, you always want to have a little more edge loops in your elbows, knees, and knuckle areas, right? Because those areas bend. So I often will go back with Alt-C for loop cut. And let's make sure to maybe get kind of an extra couple of edge loops in there, right? And then that will make it a lot easier for me to say, come in here and maybe like pull out a little bit of shape here just to kind of get a little more elbow form. So not only do you usually want something like this in here for further animation purposes, right? Because this bends. So you always want to think of like a bendy straw, right? Those straws that have the little accordion on it to bend and keep shape. You want your elbows, knees, knuckles to do that as well, right? And generally anything that bends like that, where it's going to bend, you want more edge loops. It allows it to keep its shape better. It allows it to preserve that shape better. Also, though, you'll notice it gives us more to do shape with, right? And I'll just kind of do this on one of the fingers because, you know, the great thing about teaching is I don't have to actually do all parts of it, just enough to show you the fundamental principles. So you would want to actually add in a little more geometry at your knuckles, right? So I can go in here and put kind of maybe 2 extra edge loops there at a minimum. And now you'll see, those extra little edge loops I put at the knuckles actually allow me to kind of get a little bit more of that proper crease shape. And you see I'm just doing a double left click, middle mouse to do view move. If I need to, I can put one more in there. But you see how just a couple of extra loop cuts, so it wasn't even a new tool, just loop cut, right? But you see how a couple of new loop cuts at each knuckle and a little bit of shaping, not only do you have a bit of a knuckle bump, but you have that crease, and also there's more geometry to allow it to keep its shape better as it bends. Remember, we're not just making this to look cool, we're making it to animate as well. So generally you want more edge loops in here. And I'm just using Alt-C for loop cut, right? And then W for move, middle mouse button. And we could easily get more geometry right there for animation purposes. But also it's just going to allow us to get a better shape for this, right? It's more dynamic now. Just keep in mind that you always kind of want to make sure to put in a little bit more at your knees, knuckles, kind of elbows, just to give you a bit more to shape with. But also it'll just work better for animation as well. All right, and that's just kind of supposed to be a little bit of that basic extra stuff that you might want to add into your model. And now if we look at both of these, our total polygon count in low res without any modifiers, out subdivision surface modifiers on, is only about 12,000 triangles. Actually, it's a little higher than that. Sometimes the count gets a little weird. In this case, I'm going to apply the mirror. There we go. The mirror sometimes kind of screws that up a little bit. 17,000 triangles. So we applied subdivision surface modifier twice on this model, right? Earlier on and then at the end. And we're still only at about 17,000 triangles. That'll work as a good base mesh in the vast majority of pipelines you're going to be working in, right? So that's one of the reasons why you can actually take advantage of subdivisional surfaces if you're smart about using them, right? I always tell you, if you're going to use it, you better apply it, right? You're just using it as a way to get you a good low res without having to put every edge loop in by hand. We also try to keep it simple enough so we don't get lost in all the little details. All right, and that would basically allow us to kind of have this model be done. All right, so I'll kind of stop the lecture there.